Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Charmed, as well as the season finale of American Gods. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I included time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Charmed, you can skip to what I had to say about the season finale of American Gods. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Charmed. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break down some things. First and foremost, there's everything. It's kind of interesting because obviously, we have Macy dealing with the whole awkwardness of like, hey, I'm going to work, and Galvin is there, and like, oh, we broke up, but there's also the aspect if he doesn't accept that side of me, that whole darker side. It's so interesting because like, obviously, you know, Julia has that whole thing of like, oh yeah, she's helping out Parker get rid of his demon side. It's like, oh, I can help you with yours, but it's like, oh, you want to keep yours. She didn't say anything because I guess for her, it's like, well, at the end of the day, your choices are your choices, so who am I to tell you what to do? She's more so concerned about Parker, so, you know, it's just like Macy's decision, and Macy's content with the whole keeping her dark side thing, so it's fine for her. But in Julia's case, obviously, like, you know, she understands where Macy's coming from with the whole, like, her and Galvin situation, but it's like, it's already a complicated situation, but it's going to be even more complicated when one of the people involved turns out to be more powerful than the other. It turns into an impossible situation. She should know between her and Alistair. Sadly, when it's all said and done, though, she does try to give the cure to Parker, but things go haywire. Even the moment that happened, I'm skipping around here, so I do apologize, but the moment that happened, and even earlier with the whole, like, charity situation, I'm like, it's Hunter related. I was thinking, I just had a feeling, because, like, the moment we see Julia later on, because we see that she has a mark on her neck, I'm like, she was strangled. You could tell. I was like, yeah, and Parker just knocked her back. He didn't strangle her. And then, like, I was thinking, like, yeah, she was dead the entire time. Sadly, she wasn't. It's just, what I mean is, it's worse because Hunter had her locked in the closet while that was all going down, and it's like, oh, look what happened to your son, and now I'm going to kill you. That's going to be the last thing you see, knowing that your son's demonic side was boosted, especially after Julia did everything she could to save her son, and it's sad like that. I mean, on many different levels. For one, Parker thinks he killed his mom, but two, seeing things kind of play out like that. It's interesting because obviously it's very similar to, you know, the Charmed ones, like, you know, them losing Marisol, like, kind of under similar circumstances to a certain degree, especially because it's like a mother who's trying to help you dying in the process. Like, she was unlocking their powers before she ended up dying, and, you know, you have Julia trying to turn Parker human before she died. I think when it's all said and done, and once again, me skipping around, I think that's going to be one of the things that ends up pushing Parker, no matter what his circumstances are. Obviously, like the whole source of all evil thing, I think that's what's going to push him to end up killing both potentially Hunter and Alistair, finding out that they manipulated the situation, especially if he finds out Hunter's the one that actually killed his mom. I think that's going to be enough to send him off the edge just to end up killing him anyway. Like, obviously, that's all tied to his human side, but I still kind of get the feeling like maybe there'll be more to that. It's interesting, too, because it's kind of all ties into, like, Macy's storyline with Galvin, because there's the whole, like, finding Julia's body. Obviously, he doesn't want to be involved in all of this, so she's trying to respect his wishes. Then there's the whole thing of Julia being dead, so it's like he wants to call the cops, but it's like, let me handle things my way. For him, it's like, it doesn't change anything. I got a job with Doctors Without Borders. I'm leaving in a month. Saying that basically, the fact is, I can't compartmentalize my brain like you have. So for him, it's like, I had to live with what I'd done, so I'm trying to do good and make up for it. Like, even if it wasn't me, I was still in control. And it's just, you can understand he's going through a tough time, but it is like, you kind of don't have to be an asshole about it. Like, I get it, like, you're just in a situation where, in his mind, it's like, oh, I'm trying to make things better. It's like, no. I guess in his mind, it's like, oh, as long as you just rip the Band-Aid off. Like, yeah, you can rip the Band-Aid off, but that doesn't mean it's going to hurt any less. And, like, your way of handling things, of her saying, like, oh, she's compartmentalizing and stuff like that. Like, you act like you're the only one that's having a tough time here. Yes, she's having control of her demonic side, but the fact of the matter is, it's still something she would want your support on. The fact of the matter is, she has her sister's support, so it's not, you know, for her, it's just, you look like him not realizing, like, he's like, no, I'm not looking at you like that, but maybe there's something evil. Like, even you suggesting there's something evil in her, that she's capable of that, you really don't realize how much it's coming off like you looking at her like she's a monster, like she's a demon. And that's the sad thing. And I think he's so, I mean, once again, it's like he's trying to figure himself out. He's so caught up in the trauma of everything that I think he's not recognizing what's happening in front of him with the whole Macy situation. And just like I said, it comes off a little dickish, but it's a thing of like, I understand what he's going through. He's going through a trauma, so you, like, of course, the way he's reacting wouldn't be the normal way Galvin would react, you know? But still, it's just those circumstances. Everything going on with Parker, you know, especially because Hunter disguises himself as Maggie to push him away, because it's all meant to push him closer to his dad. And then, you know, everything with Mel, her, and Nico. I love that. Like, Nico just kicking it around a lot. Like, even that moment later on of Nico being like, whoa, look at you, you're freezing time. This is so cool. I could just take my clothes off and no one even know. And Mel is kind of like, yeah, sure. I even love when they broke into Tessa's place. She's like, where'd you learn that off? Because, like, she's like, a cop I knew taught me. It's just like, oh, awkward. I'm surprised they didn't make a moment of it, but obviously them being in the closet together. To be fair, if you notice, it was a roomy closet. It wasn't like a tight, small space closet, which I was kind of expecting it to be, them kind of be all close, tight, and personal, and that'd be super awkward for Mel, but it's like, no, it turned out not to be the case. But it's so interesting, like, obviously, like, Nico getting excited, like, yeah, getting part of these cases and stuff like that. Yeah, I'll get to learn more and more about magic and stuff like that. I love that. But it brought about some interesting conversations, the whole situation with Nico being like, she felt like something happened 2 years ago. I'm chalking that up to obviously like the time change, but maybe something else happened in her life, not just like, oh, the history being rewritten, something else particular happened in that moment. And obviously Mel doesn't want to tell her the truth, but I wonder if she's going to try, like, obviously she's like, I'm not going to hide anything else from you, I'm not going to lie to you, but I'm not going to help you find out the truth. You're going to find it out, maybe you're going to have to find it out on your own, even giving her a ring that blocks magic from being used on her. I'm sure that's going to come in handy. It's probably good, like I said, get super complicated the moment she finds out, like, wait, what? You and me, we had a relationship? Like, why did you do that? It's going to be a whole complicated thing, I'm sure. Once again, she is engaged in everything. That's so many levels of complicated. But maybe part of me because it's like, oh, what happened to me 2 years ago? Maybe it was something supernatural, maybe it wasn't. Maybe that's also why Mel isn't worried too much, because it's like, well, unless she knows exactly where to look, she's not going to know to look in this direction to be like, oh, that's what happened. That basically the past 2 years we spent together got erased and you basically live in a completely different life. Basically, we created a whole nother timeline. I don't know if you necessarily will jump to that conclusion, and I don't know what necessary like breadcrumbs you would have to follow to get to that conclusion, but still, it's definitely going to be interesting to see Nico try. But I also appreciate the fact is just seeing her kind of dabble in this world more. What's also interesting though is obviously learning more about why Fiona is doing all she's doing. Like, seeing her actually kill like some of the remaining Sarkana, which is brutal, dude. It's also interesting because it seems like, I guess, I wonder, is that just something she could do naturally, or is that something she's learned to do because she's the Flame Keeper, the whole being able to mirror people's abilities? That might have been something she's always been able to do, but that was kind of interesting. It's sad and just shows you how ruthless she can be. We never found out 100% of why she's the way she is, but I still chalk it up to she was in Tartarus for a very, very long time, being tortured by your own memories and stuff like that. It's enough to kind of drive you crazy, and it kind of makes you sit on a lot of stuff to understand why you got to where you did at that moment. Like, her plan is that she's looking for something known as the Origin Dagger, and it turns out her plan is to basically, because she's snapping at everyone, because Harry's suggesting like, hey, when it's all said and done, why don't you go to the Charmed Ones? They can help you. Because for her, because even Jada had asked her, like, why did you turn against the Sarkana? Because it's like, for Fiona, it's like, you're using me just like the Elder Sword. In her mind, even though the Sarkana represents what it is, kind of being against the Elders, it's still a situation, and she feels like you're just another group that wants to use me for my power and stuff like that. So it turns into that type of situation. And so her goal is to get rid of all magic, which is interesting because immediately, when it took me a while, but eventually I was like, what would that mean for demons? Because, I mean, it's kind of interesting you're up here willing to take away all magic, but it's like the Charmed Ones are supposed to defeat the source of all evil. I'm like, won't demons kind of operate on a different level? So won't you getting rid of magic affect just them and demons can still run about. But I guess like when magic gets wiped out, it affects everyone, supernatural creatures, witches, and which includes witches and demons as well. Especially when we learn the interesting information that basically the flame that Fiona is after to basically give her the power needed to destroy all magic, and the source of all evil comes from, literally the same source. So witches and demons' powers come from the same thing. So if Fiona did get rid of all the magic, it would in turn make it so that demons, would they stop being demons, or would they just not have access to their magical powers anymore? That's kind of an interesting thought process. But the real interesting thing, it was kind of like her because for Fiona, it's like magic ruined her life. It's like once upon a time it was this magical, amazing thing, but then just like her life just got turned upside down, so many different complications because of it. And so when the time came, like, she just wants to destroy it, And I think when it's all said and done, I don't think it's going to make things better, but I think in her mind she does think it's better, because she feels like she's got no one she can turn to. She only has herself. She can't trust anyone because everyone's got their own ambitions in her mind. They're just going to use her like everyone else has, which is such a shame, because Harry's trying to reach out to her, but she doesn't want to listen to him. Which is so interesting that we find like both siblings on different sides of the situation. Obviously, Fiona's going down her path with this whole thing, but like I said, it's just interesting because it's all connected. And now Charity is working with Alice, not necessarily because she wants to, but like he needs her to help him bring forth the source of all evil. She put on that those clothes, that suit or whatever he gave her. I guess it makes it easier to not be sucked into Tartarus's flames, or makes you immune to like its flames, or the scorpions that kind of drown you essentially and torture you with your own memories, and maybe it makes it so they're repellent. Like, I don't know what exactly. The suit was able to kill those guards that were taking her to Tartarus, but beyond that, we don't know exactly what that suit is. It's kind of sad that Charity finds herself in the middle of all this, because now, like I said, they're on two opposite sides, and those two sides are going to clash. Obviously, he still got the dagger, and he got what he wanted in the end anyway, because he's turning Parker into the source of all evil. But what does that mean about Fiona? Will we see Fiona joining forces with the Charmlets to stop all of this, so she can get the power herself to do this? Or is it going to be a situation of she's just going to go and steal it for herself anyway? It seems like everything's already in motion, but maybe there's a way to stop things from getting worse, or maybe there's like an intermediate process that Parker has to go through before his human side completely dies out and he becomes the source of all evil. So maybe that's kind of like the window of opportunity for everyone, the charmed ones, as well as Fiona. What's also interesting too is that we also learned that Fiona apparently can't bounce back. Even though Fiona is as powerful as the Power of 3, she can't actually mirror the Power of 3. It's so unique to them that even she can't mirror it, and she ended up taking a blow. Luckily, they were able to rescue Harry. Sadly, Tessa ended up dying in the process. It's kind of interesting. I wonder what they would have done, because Tessa was kind of under orders to basically, when Harry gets rescued, bring him back immediately. Like, was Harry the one that had the map to the origin in him, or was it any White Lighter is what I'm curious about. I kind of feel like it had to be any White Lighter, because so I guess just Harry was the, opportunity that Fiona could take, but still. And like I said, it still kind of ties in itself to it. Like, my thought process of it was her getting revenge against the Elders. Her destroying magic would be her way to get back at the Elders, because they wouldn't have their magic anymore. They wouldn't be all high and mighty. They'd just be regular people, so it'd be a situation of they lose that position that they had. So that'd be kind of the ultimate middle finger to them, with this whole situation. But beyond that, still, I wonder why would they bring Harry back? It's so interesting because the conversation had come up before, how wish they're going to use Tessa to track Harry. And it's because Harry had gotten his powers back. I didn't 100% realize that that's what it was. I wouldn't have thought that, Fiona would have actually given him his powers back. But obviously, he's under her control. But also, she needed him to have his powers back so he'd be tapped into the source that all White Lighters are connected to, so she could get the information she needs to know, which we now know is connected to the origin dagger. Which is so interesting. It's like there's this whole boundary of like, oh, we're going to hunt demons and stuff like that, when in actuality the power comes from the same place. It just comes down basically to your soul, like who it is a person tapping into. If you're kind of an evil person, you tap into it like a demon. Obviously, if you're a good person, you tap into the good magic like a witch and stuff like that. Which begs the question, being on the path that she's on, what about Fiona? Especially the way Fiona kind of talks about other witches. It almost seems, I guess because she hates them so much, she doesn't consider herself one anymore. She just considers herself someone with powers and magic. So I guess she kind of leans more towards the demon side of things, maybe, potentially. Which, speaking of that, there's a whole Macy situation, which we see that, obviously she's like, no, I got my demon side under control, but we see that it is growing. It is going to get to that point that Macy does it more and more and more, and I think it's going to get to the point she kind of gets a little more too reliant on it, and it gets a little addicting. And obviously, like, Galvin and everyone else has the right to be concerned with this whole situation of, because even Harry was like, yeah, let's not rely on it too much, because you haven't paid the price yet, but there will be a price. Like, there has to be a balance to all of that. Like, you getting that power isn't just for free. It's going to take its toll on you, whether that's devouring your soul or what, which I'm kind of leaning into because eventually it'll probably get to the point that it starts eating away at her soul until the demon side of her takes control more and more. Which begs the question, considering demon and witch side energies kind of come from the same place, when it's all said and done, like, it'll probably just, basically be a demon with magic. Which I guess demons all kind of have magic. I never really thought about that too much in the original series, that, those are demons with magic. I just thought that was just, like, demonic power. But I don't know if that was ever a conversation in the original series about, like, demon power and, like, witches' magic coming from the same place. Maybe it has. I don't know. But I'm curious to see what the elders do in the end with all of this kind of turning the way it is, because Harry's kind of independent of all of them now. It's like, obviously, he could leave and live his own life, but it's like, of course, he's not going to leave the charmed ones alone in this situation. Their family. Like I said, it is kind of sad. You didn't want things to kind of end this way for Tessa, but Tessa was kind of a hard ass, but in the end, it's like, yeah, this is your fight, and I'm here to fight it, and she ended up taking a blow so that, Mel wouldn't, and ended up dying from it. It's actually kind of sad and beautiful, like, a White Lighter's death, because Harry sprays something on her, and she turns into that light, and, her light extinguishes. I guess that's almost like her going back to the source, essentially. Everything that makes a White Lighter, everything that she was and is as a White Lighter and who she was as a person is all gone. I mean, to be fair, every White Lighter loses their identity, so who they were before is kind of gone already, sadly. So, but it's just kind of sad to see things kind of play out like that. I feel like, I think the original show, the Charmed One's other White Lighter, did she die? I don't remember. Their substitute White Lighter, I don't remember. I feel like she did later on, but not immediately. It wasn't until, like, she was done being their White Lighter, like, sometime later she ended up dying, but I could be misremembering. Once again, it's been a while. But I'm curious, like, obviously I was bringing up earlier Macy's, like, demonic side and everything. Like, I feel like, obviously, it grows stronger, like, probably, like, the stronger her negative emotions kind of grow, because obviously she's dealing with everything with her and Galvin. So probably the stronger that is, and probably the more stress and anxiety and problems that stem from that situation, because she's still going to be working with Galvin for the next month, and that's just going to be a reminder as time's clicking down that they're going to be away from each other, and also, once again, the whole aspect of how he views her. Probably going to feed that more, and probably even more and more if she continues to use the power, which she'll probably end up using it, because she'll probably come up with excuses like, no, I need to use it, even though she doesn't need to, and there's going to be a situation of she's told once again to stop using it, but she'll probably use it in secret. So things continue to take a very, very interesting turn, and I'm very interested to see where all of this takes us going forward into the next episode. And now moving on to the season finale of American Gods. A great season finale. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, there's that whole monologue that Mr. World has at the beginning. I thought was really fascinating. The whole aspect of fear. Basically, like, fear is like the more you believe, the more you believe. And just saying how fear is control, and that essentially just showing just how fear can shape you and just shape kind of the world and everything. And I just thought it was kind of interesting. And it's not just like, oh, this is just something he's saying. It's like, no, it matters a lot to the episode in itself. So there's a lot of things that are going to break down. Like, obviously, there's everything between Shadow and Laura. Like, obviously, things would never be the same. Because I think for Shadow, for so long he's been holding on to, like, I guess you can make this argument, like, this fantasized notion of Laura, but after everything, it's just kind of like, I don't know, it almost feels like he might have pretty much given up, especially because he's like, yeah, don't call me puppy anymore, you know? And I guess that was kind of the sign for Laura of, like, yeah, he's no longer mine. Like, what she fought so long for, what she thought she was fighting for so long is no longer there, you know, because Shadow doesn't look at her as the same woman anymore. I don't think it's just necessarily the dead thing, but it's just kind of like everything put together, plus the realization of, obviously, like, him accidentally killing Mad, and then all the stuff he's learning about Wednesday kind of open and abandoning him, is just a lot to kind of take in, I think. And even now, you have Laura being like, oh, I'm going to kill Wednesday. Are you going to get one? He's like, it's a free country. So it's kind of interesting. Her conversation with Bilquis, I thought, was kind of interesting, whereas basically Bilquis is like, oh, the fact of the matter is, if you decide to go against Wednesday, he's weakened, because to be fair, he doesn't have his spear, and currently he doesn't have his bodyguard too, so he's definitely at a disadvantage. But I think it's a situation of, she's like, yeah, but he's still wily, and the fact is you're going to need a lot of power. And Laura asks, like, will you help me then? It's like, why? It's like, she's like, I can definitely tell you got that face of, like, yeah, I want to punch him in the face. So that's interesting, though. Like I said, it's so interesting because I feel like Bilquis is still doing that. Like, I thought of, like, she's not 100% on Wednesday's side. She's probably waiting until, like, it's all said and done for both sides to clash to kind of really sit on the winner's side. But, I mean, I still feel like she's still on Mr. World's side. Maybe. Or maybe it's just she hates Wednesday and she just wants him dead. Or maybe she thinks if Wednesday's dead, then it kind of works out for her favor, but probably going up against Wednesday by herself isn't enough. He's got plenty enough allies surrounding him, so I think she's going to let Laura do what she needs to do and then come in if need be and kind of deal with a final blow or something like that. Potentially. It's so interesting because Bilquis has taken an interest in everyone. She took an interest in Laura. She's definitely taken an interest in Shadow because she wants him to know who he really is. And the fact is, she's like, I'm betting on your survival that, you know, our fortunes are connected. And he's like, how? You know, so it's still that situation of everyone knows but Shadow. He's still in the dark. You have Ebis and Nancy having their little chess game. And I even love that whole conversation of, like, oh, kind of removing your king from the... it was something like that, removing your king from the board, leaving your knight as a distraction, all while Shadow's stuck there. Because everything that's going on with the guy that we now know his name is Mr. Z is the tech kid returns. Kind of, I guess, new and improved. He's kind of back on the board. And basically, he talks about the fact of the matter is science is, you know, humans' way of kind of touching God, because we want to know that when it's all said and done, we match up because we're made in God's image. And the tech kid is like, no, we're made in your image, you and all your flaws. The fact of the matter is, like, you know what powers the imagination, you know, and even touches him, and it's like, is that what you... Is it all you wanted, all you thought it would be touching to God? Because he made a reference to the whole Sistine Chapel, a flash of light when man touches God, you know? But it seems like the tech kid was just using him because it's like everything in that moment. I wonder, was this the tech kid's way of kind of getting back at him? I guess, like, maybe, you know, Mr. World put him in timeout for a little bit so he can come back a little more reprogrammed. Or maybe that's what... I don't know how to interpret that scene. Is it like, oh, Mr. World put him back on a playing board after he got re-educated and reaffirmed to what he's doing? Or is it supposed to be Mr. Z brought him back in a sense of like, oh, he got inspired, and so he ended up bringing back the tech kid, believing in him in a new whole way, and he's coming back stronger than ever. Either way, it's interesting because, like, now they have access to all his tech, because apparently, like, he's kind of like their centerfold for pretty much everything. He's kind of supposed to he's the new Argus system, essentially. With Argus gone, they needed a new and more powerful and updated version, and they got into his system and created Argus, and a new Argus using him. So it's a combination of the tech kid and new media creating this hysteria that's created, being like, oh, there's everything that went down in Indiana. Yeah, that was Shadow, and that was Wednesday. And in fact, they started blaming them for other stuff too. Salim got caught up in the whole situation too, because that's the cool, interesting thing too, because even Salim being on the inside of this situation still was watching the news being like, oh my god, is this true? Did Shadow Mr. Wednesday do that? I think, you know, because even Ebis is like, the fact is, when you're watching TV, you should have a bit of skepticism, but it's that thing, it's that fear. It's like fear that you didn't realize you already had, that it was, like I said, that whole thing Mr. World was talking about of like, it's there. It's like the fear of something you didn't know you were afraid of, and then it becomes a thing of like, you didn't know it exists, but it does exist. And so I think maybe on some level, maybe even Salim was starting to wonder like, wait, I didn't do this stuff. It's like, hey, did you guys actually kill it? Oh God, thank goodness that you and Mr. Wednesday didn't actually kill those cops. So there's that whole situation. It is interesting though, and like I was wondering why Wednesday was just sneaking off. Is it just because he had, like Shadow had learned what he learned? It's like, no, it's because once again Wednesday's leaving Shadow, as Nancy says it, under the fucking knife, because he wants to see what Shadow does. He wants Shadow to rise the occasion. He's like, Shadow needs to kind of do things on his own. He needs it. Like, that's the whole reason why he left Shadow. He took Laura the last time after the train crashed and everything, because he needed Shadow to take that path. He needed to kind of him to go through and see what he needed to go through to lead him back to Cairo, you know? And so now we see a very similar situation of, you know, he's trying to run, but before he does, Yggdrasil ends up grabbing him. So, and obviously he's thinking back to everything his mom said, kind of learning about the truth and realizing that Wednesday is his dad. I kind of always had a feeling, but I was like, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe, you know, Wednesday had hidden his face or something like that. I don't know. Because I was about to say, because I was like, Odin has multiple kids in mythology, not just Thor, right? I would assume, I could have sworn he had multiple kids, not just, I don't know, because once again, I don't know, like, Norse mythology like that. I'm familiar with, like, a few gods here and there, but I'm not that familiar with them, you know, to kind of know off the top of my head like that, so. I even love, like, new media taunting him and stuff like that, being like, oh, you probably can't recognize me because I've got new faces, and you see her just kind of controlling the narrative and spreading the fear about everything, and it's like, dude, that's a way to hit hard. It's kind of interesting, like, how the tables have kind of turned, because if you look at the end of season 1, it looked like things kind of ended off in, it's like, you know, you have Wednesday making his big move, so it seemed like things were kind of in his favor, but now you see everything's kind of in Mr. World's favor, because he's basically turned literally the entire world against Shadow, at least the States, and it's like there's no running for him. To a certain extent, because it's like their faces are out there, their names are out there. There's this whole data breach, which means like Mr. World and his associates have control of everything. There's no place that none of them can hide. I don't necessarily know if the gods are worried about that, if they necessarily have to hide, because even Shadow had that conversation with Salim being like, they're not like us. The fact of the matter is they'll be fine, but we're the type that could die today. But Salim decided to stay because for him, it's like, I know you're concerned for me and I appreciate it, but for him, it's like, I'm going to make my own choices, I guess, because he's kind of had so many people kind of make choices for him, so this is kind of his moment. And I guess Shadow Salad kind of caught in that moment of like, it's hard to say whether he's actually making his own choices or whether they're just all part of Wednesday's game. And, you know, obviously it's very befitting, the whole chess game and everything like that. And I love the whole conversation of like, oh, I'm going to take Salim away from your, the Jin says, and, you know, Ibis is like, can you even, you know, go against Wednesday's orders like that? It's like, well, I can kill whoever and whenever I want. And Nancy's like, ooh, you sound, that's scary as shit when you say the shit that way. And you have the Jin playing the board and saying, check motherfucker to Nancy. So that's interesting. There was also an interesting conversation too. Ibis was like, does he know, Salim, know what's going to happen to you if you break your bond to Wednesday? And he's like, he doesn't, it doesn't matter what he knows. It matters essentially what he does. And I guess the Jin gets stronger from the fact is that, like, obviously Salim believes in him and kind of loves him. And I think, because for Salim, it's like, no matter what we are, what we become, the fact of the matter is, I'm happy because you taught me how to love, you know? So I'm interested to see where their journey ends up taking them going forward, potentially, you know? You also had this interesting thing where Laura ended up taking Mad's body. And I'm like, okay, so because it shows you that she does care. It's interesting though, because like there was that point that they showed her stepping in his blood. It seemed like she was doing it on purpose too. I'm assuming she's going to try and resurrect him, I think, when the time comes. Maybe not. That's kind of where my mindset is. Not unless it was her trying to give him a proper burial, but the fact that she went through the trouble of taking him. Because I think for her, you could even tell how upset she was, you know, learning that he was dead, seeing his blood on the floor. Because her and Sweeney have a complicated relationship. They've always kind of butted heads, but I think that shows that she does care about him, whether she'd really admit it or not. She liked being around him, and I think, like I said, they just had that very complicated relationship. So I think this is all going to be steps towards her coming back to life again. It's not going to be Shadow. It's going to be Mad. That might be the key to everything. I'm curious though if Mad does come back to life. I mean, I guess dying kind of gets rid of his contract. Well, his bond with Wednesday, because it's kind of done. It's like, oh yeah, well, he got the war that he wanted to die on. So if he comes back, he might be the power that Laura's going to need to kill Wednesday. So what's also interesting though is like Shadow did pick up one of his coins, and also Matt is the only one that could ever get Gungnir now from the Horde. So I think that might be a role to play in this. That might be what Laura ends up doing. Like she brings him back, they get the spear, they get Gungnir from the Horde, and they used it against Wednesday, which now who Shadow might be more inclined to protect him, knowing that that's his dad. I don't know. I doubt it. It might kind of lend itself more to like a son versus father, kind of that age-old thing. Maybe potentially. I mean, we saw it already happen once with Donar, but who knows if history is going to repeat itself with Shadow or not. And speaking of Donar, it seems like I was completely wrong, because I was thinking like, oh, that was, I mean, because I thought like, maybe either, Wednesday was wrong, or he had lied about the whole Donar situation playing out the way it did, or I thought Mr. World had brought him back. So, but it turns out the storm that they were bringing was this whole situation, which, like I said, is crazy, the chaos that's ensuing, and I think obviously Mr. World is kind of feeding off of that, because maybe that's how he gets his belief, because he made that whole conversation of people think love is what makes the world spin. It doesn't. So I guess that's what this is supposed to be. By him kind of making the world fear and the chaos spreading, it's making him stronger. It's making people believe, because believing in, their deepest fears and stuff like that, because he's tapping into that. So maybe that's what I'm thinking, but I could be wrong. But what was really interesting is when Shadow cracked open Yggdrasil and there was that light. I'm curious, what Shadow actually did, because obviously he's thinking back to when he was a little boy and his mom being like, don't let them find you, and he wiped all the toy soldiers off the board, and then they were just gone. So it's like, what did he do exactly? And even Nancy coming in, seeing that Yggdrasil is gone, and he's going laughing and being like kind of happy about this, of this turn of events. I guess things are going exactly the way Wednesday wants them to, because he's like, my boy is going to be fine, just fine, so I'm curious. Shadow probably hasn't fully accessed what he can do, what he is, but maybe given enough time he can. Maybe he has the power to kind of shape the world, because he even has that fake ID, so it makes you wonder, is that what that's supposed to represent, him kind of bending the world to his, especially if he's a god, but maybe that's it. Or maybe that's the whole point. Maybe that's the purpose that Yggdrasil was supposed to serve, was supposed to kind of be a teleporter for him, Or, what actually happened to the tree? Did it die? Does it have to be regrown again after using its powers like that to get Shadow away? It's hard to say. I don't know. I just looked it up. The show has been officially renewed for a third season, which I'm so excited to see what they do, because obviously it's so interesting, just the whole thing of seeing that Shadow and Laura are on completely different paths. It's interesting, the two people who kind of didn't, in Shadow's case, the person who didn't believe until he believed, and Laura, who didn't believe in anything. It seems like she's on her path to finding something to believe in, and I'm wondering going forward, when she looks at Shadow, will she see her light, or, has that completely faded because of everything? The last time we saw, she still saw him as her light, but maybe that's going to change. I also meant to bring this up earlier. There was that one of the coins that he picked up from Mad. It looked different from the other ones, but maybe all the other coins looked like this, and it was just his first time looking at it up close. But part of me was wondering, is that going to be connected to the Horde? Could that be his way to get to the Horde, kind of being his way of pulling Gungnir out of it and kind of wielding it himself? I have no idea. I'm curious, like in a third season, like, are we going to see a lot more spread out groups in that regard? You know, like probably see Shadow 100% on his own. Maybe he'll come across somebody. Part of me wonders, is he going to come across Sam again? Just because they went out of their trouble to introduce him to her, like, I just feel like there's got to be more to that they'll run into each other. That might be the situation they're kind of setting up in that regard. And obviously, Laura's off doing her own thing. We might even be seeing her heading back to New Orleans, like I said, to try and bring Mad back to life. Are we going to be seeing some familiar faces from these past 2 seasons? Are we going to run into new gods potentially? Like Mr. Ibis, for example. Like, well, the fact is, the way he operates, the way he, writes, everything down. So I feel like we might see him in the future, but he might not be in the direct. Well, I don't know, because obviously, like, he's still kind of, he has his own part to play in this whole situation. Like Nancy, for example, I'm sure we'll see a lot of Nancy going forward, but like Mr. Ibis, I'm not sure. Like, we'd probably see him every once in a while when he's kind of like writing stuff down, but I don't know if we'll directly see him or not. We'll see. Then, like I said, the whole situation with the Jinn and Celine, what their story holds for them. I mean, hell, will even Celine make it out of this alive? Obviously, he's wanted as well, so luckily he's got a Jinn backing him up, but still, like, the problem of being a human amongst a squabble amongst gods, there's a lot of collateral damage, And like I also brought up, like, I'm also curious to see, like, what Shadow's journey is going to look like, who he's going to look like when it's all said and done in season 3. Like, a lot of this stuff is on. I'm very interested to see what season 3 has in store for us. But really, that's all I want to talk about today. Next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.